This video is sponsored by Cowan, a comprehensive identity theft protection service that I recommend to help keep your identity safe. To sign up, simply go to coveron.com/companyman20 and use the code companyman20 to get 20% off. The link is in the description. Gatorade versus Powerade is one of the most direct rivalries imaginable. I mean, Powerade was created by Coca-Cola, the world's largest beverage company, to compete directly against Gatorade. They even gave it a similar name. And here we are, after almost 40 years of trying to close that gap, and they have not even come close. Consider that sports drinks have become a multi-billion-dollar market in the US alone, and Gatorade is responsible for something like 60 to 65% of that market, compared to only about 15% for Powerade. I will admit that they have slowly gained some ground. These numbers are looking a little better than they used to, but realistically, I cannot imagine Powerade ever becoming the market leader. But even though this rivalry has been unusually one-sided, it has still been eventful. So for this video, I want to take a bit of a different approach by highlighting some of the more notable parts of each decade these brands have existed. You'll see what I mean, starting out with the 1960s. It is hard to imagine that at the start of this decade, sports drinks did not even exist. The entire category was essentially created in 1965 when a group of 4 doctors working at the University of Florida invented Gatorade. The idea behind it was to create a drink that would not only rehydrate, but provide energy and replace the sodium and other minerals that the athletes would naturally lose as they sweat throughout a game. That way, the Florida Gator sports teams, as they are called, would theoretically have an advantage over their opponents that were simply drinking water. And considering they did win the Orange Bowl in 1967, there was a lot of buzz surrounding the drink. Around that same time, the rights to it were acquired by Stokely Van Camp, a consumer foods company already widely known for their pork and beans, so they had the means to get it to the store shelves and available to the public. It also became the official sports drink of the NFL right when it was becoming the most popular sports league in the country. The 1970s was admittedly not the most eventful decade. Slow and steady growth for Gatorade, as it was still widely considered a drink for athletes. And I have to mention that there was a Gator gum introduced that I don't think was ever too significant for the brand. Early in the decade, I think it is interesting that Coca-Cola introduced their first sports drink. It was called Olympade. Obviously, it was lower effort and short-lived because nobody predicted so much potential for the category, but looking back, if they had been more aggressive with it or with something similar at the time, that would have been their chance to catch up to Gatorade. The 1980s is when things really started happening. In 1983, Stokely Van Camp was acquired by a much larger consumer foods company, Quaker Oats, for $220 million, where a spokesperson from Quaker Oats called Gatorade the most attractive part of their business. It was by far the main motivator behind the deal, so in the years that followed, Quaker Oats invested a lot of money into building the brand. It was promoted to a much wider demographic of anyone who, well, needed some serious thirst quenching, with new flavors starting out with fruit punch that first year. Up until that point, there was only the classic lemon lime and orange. In 1984, they became the official sports drink of the NBA, and right now, that is the NBA's longest standing partnership. The Gatorade shower, where the team dumps all the Gatorade on their head coach, originated with the Giants and quickly became a Super Bowl tradition. I'm sure I don't have to tell you that being a big part of the most televised event of the year is really good for promoting the brand. They started selling it in international markets, starting with Canada, that was soon followed by Asia, Europe, and South America. By the end of the decade, sales were 5 times higher compared to the year before Quaker took it over, so I think it is safe to say that is when sports drinks became an attractive market. The 1990s is probably the most eventful decade in sports drink history, because once Gatorade had proven that there was a market for them, seemingly everyone all at once was trying to get into that market. So many smaller brands like Power Burst and 10K that will really bring you back to the 1990s if you remember them at all. But as you might expect, some of the most successful challengers came from Pepsi and Coca-Cola. Initially, Pepsi introduced Mountain Dew Sport, trying to attract the soda drinkers with a carbonated sports drink. I think it is funny that a Pepsi spokesperson at the time said 80% of people who drink soft drinks do not drink Gatorade. Of the people who do, many say they don't like the taste. The big difference between Mountain Dew Sport and Gatorade is that Mountain Dew Sport tastes good. Yeah, kind of a harsh statement, and they went on to make direct comparisons to Gatorade in a lot of their marketing. Well, despite having all this hype around it, Mountain Dew Sport was quickly discontinued and effectively replaced by Pepsi with a new drink a couple years later called All Sport that was promoted by top athletes, including Shaquille O'Neal and Ken Griffey Jr. Oddly enough, All Sport was also carbonated at first. I guess they were still figuring it all out and trying to offer something different that might attract people, but to me anyway, carbonating a sports drink seems like a strange way to go. Maybe others felt the same way, because in 1996, All Sport had a $30 million relaunch, where they mostly took the carbonation out of it. Now, over at Coca-Cola, this is where Powerade enters the picture. It was technically launched in 1988, but only in test markets and only as a fountain drink in fast food restaurants and convenience stores. They specifically said that there was no plan to sell it in cans or bottles, which again sounds like a strange approach for a drink that is meant to be consumed while playing sports. But in 1992, they started putting it in bottles and promoted it as a more effective alternative to Gatorade.
With 33% more carbos than Gatorade, it's Powerade.
Potentially because Gatorade already formed relationships with most of the major US sports leagues, Powerade focused more on international sports through sponsorships like FIFA and the Olympics. Things were getting pretty intense in the 1990s, but despite all of it, Gatorade remained on top. I should mention here that throughout the entire decade, it was being promoted by arguably the most popular athlete of the decade, Michael Jordan. The Be Like Mike campaign early in the 1990s, followed by the Is It In You campaign in the late 1990s really helped Gatorade stay in the lead. By 2000, they controlled 86% of the market, compared to 11% from Powerade and 3% from All Sports. Moving on to the 2000s, which were also quite eventful. In 2001, all of Quaker Oats, the owner of Gatorade, was acquired by Pepsi, the owner of All Sport, for over $13 billion. It was a massive deal that included multiple consumer food brands, but yet again, Gatorade was the main motivation behind it. As we just saw in that graph, Pepsi was trailing behind Coca-Cola when it came to sports drinks, and this deal made them the undisputed leader. There were actually regulatory concerns that forced Pepsi to sell All Sport, where the brand has since faded away under different owners. Today, it looks like All Sport is only available as a powder. So that right there is what I would consider the moment it became a contest between two similarly named brands that happen to be owned by Coke and Pepsi. From this point, a lot of the rivalry revolves around the introduction of competing flavors and variations. For example, Gatorade introduced Propel in 2002 as an enhanced fitness water. Powerade responded to it by introducing Option shortly after, that was effectively replaced by Powerade Zero in 2007. And then Gatorade took over a decade before they introduced Gatorade Zero in 2018. And then that was followed by Zero Sugar Powerade Ultra and Powerade Power Water in 2020. And then Gatorade put out their first unflavored water in 2024, followed by a line of lower sugar drinks in 2026, so it is forever evolving on both ends. I don't want to get too caught up in the details here, but you can see how it became a back and forth contest of releasing comparable versions of similar products. In 2003, Gatorade had what I think is a really cool Super Bowl commercial where Michael Jordan is playing a game of one-on-one against his younger self. And coincidentally, that same year, shortly before his NBA debut, Coca-Cola made a deal with LeBron James to promote Powerade along with Sprite. But in 2021, he switched over to Pepsi products, specifically Mountain Dew, but as far as I can tell, he has not yet promoted Gatorade. The 2010s is when Powerade officially became a billion-dollar brand, truly reflecting how popular sports drinks have become. The biggest thing I can say about this decade is that a new competitor named Body Armor entered the picture. It was started in 2011 as a premium sports drink that contained more natural ingredients like coconut water and less sodium. It was heavily associated with NBA player Kobe Bryant, who was an early investor and a member of the board of directors. Moving along to the 2020s, Body Armor and Powerade were practically neck and neck, competing for that number 2 spot when Coca-Cola acquired Body Armor for over $5 billion. They had actually acquired 15% of it a few years earlier, and that price was to take control of the rest of it. It remains their biggest ever acquisition, so you you'd know they were serious about competing in this segment. So now, Coca-Cola is the owner of 2 brands that struggle to compete with Gatorade, one that they originated and one that they acquired. They combine for about a quarter of the market, while Gatorade remains at well over half. In 2023, Powerade rebranded all of their labels to be brighter and, well, less black, and maybe more importantly, they reformulated the drink to include twice as many electrolytes as Gatorade, along with vitamin C and B12. I have no idea if any of that actually makes it healthier or more effective, but it at least sounds good, and from what I can tell, it has mostly been viewed as a positive change. To summarize, both of these brands deserve a lot of credit. Gatorade is iconic. They created the category and were able to build a strong lead with it before others truly realized what they were doing. Then Powerade came along, maybe not as iconic, but provided at least some level of competition that has helped push them both forward. And then Body Armor entering the mix made things even more competitive, so I think this is a cool story with some unexpected turns that has shaped the industry into what it is today. Let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts about the evolution of Gatorade and Powerade? Which one do you prefer? What are the factors that influence your preference? And has that preference ever changed over the years? I guess the most obvious question here is, what do you see for the future? Can you envision a scenario where Powerade surpasses their longtime rival and takes over that #1 spot? And any other thoughts you have about Gatorade, Powerade, or anything else in this video, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say. CoverOn is today's sponsor, and you know, scammers are out there right now using AI to create messages that are dangerously convincing, harder to spot than ever before. It'll look like it's coming from your bank or someone you trust, and it's really just someone trying to steal your identity. Now, CoverOn is a service that helps protect against this in multiple ways. They scan the dark web to see if your personal information is out there, they track your credit card for suspicious charges, and monitor your bank accounts for unusual activity. They will send alerts to help catch it early, but if a scam does get through, they provide human support to help with the recovery process and financial protection. Are you ready for these numbers? Up to $2 million for identity theft recovery costs, up to $25,000 in home title insurance, up to $50,000 if you're targeted with cyber extortion or threats, and up to $10,000 if you lose money to scams or online fraud. To sign up, all you have to do is go to coveron.com/companyman20 and use the code companyman20 to get 20% off. The link is in the description. Thank you for watching.